Learning the basics of CSS is really straightforward as compared to the common misconception in the market that it is easy to learn and tough to master. Having said that, it's also possible to ignore some common mistakes that developers make. Let's check them out. There will surely be errors if you are using generic names like .grid, .box, etc. For example, you want to apply CSS on product designing, then you may name it as product.grid instead of just .grid. The problem will arise when you will import third-party style sheets on your app, which might lead to code errors. If you want to keep your class names short and unique, try adding a prefix to it. All of you know that IDs cannot be reused. IDs are unique identification for every element, though if you are reusing the same ID, applying the same ID to some other element, HTML or the browser never gives you the error. But you have to make sure that it remains unique. The same applies to ID selector as well. So when you are applying the ID selector, you have to make sure that it is for just the specific elements. For any repetitive CSS, never ever use ID selectors. Put your that CSS always in class selectors. I've seen developers overusing the ZIndex by using high values when trying to put an element in front of the other. What if another person needs to move another element up? This person will have to set an even higher ZIndex value, isn't it? I recommend using it wisely and moderately, increasing the necessary amount to achieve the desired result. It is also important that using a preprocessor like SAS or Stylus will help you in handling ZIndex layers on your application even better with a smarter way. Everyone will tell you that reusing is a good practice in life. Certainly, it is good in CSS as well. Inline styles have a specificity that is higher than any external styling, and you could override them only by using the exclamation important. For example, here we have a paragraph. The style which I have used is just color, but this is what inline styling is. You should try to avoid this way, rather put the CSS classes or other way of selectors to apply the CSS rather than just using the inline styling. Why do we use this keyword? That's the first question. Using exclamation important normally means you are trying to override some property with a higher specificity, or you don't want other team members or developers to be able to override a property that you are setting. For example, here when I say background color green, and if I apply important, that means no matter the division has inline style or any other selector like ID selector, but it's going to go green only because you have given the exclamation important. And this means you are breaking the chain of logical CSS specificity, which is not a very good idea. Unless you are stuck somewhere and you just want to override and it is not harming your CSS, you may go for important, but it's absolutely not advisable. When I say about specificity, it means that generally it happens the CSS properties, the CSS rules are applied and cancelled. That is, most of the time you see that on a single element, multiple CSS properties are getting applied. That's what too much of specificity is. So generally you write the CSS where you make sure that the elements do not receive multiple CSS rules and then they get cancelled by the specificity that is the priority. Try to design your CSS in such a way so there are less number of cancellations on the CSS rule application. For example, here on this paragraph, the ID selector, the element selector and the class selector, they all are applying almost the same rules. So this is where you need to design in such a way so that only specific rules are applied on this paragraph. So less cancellation of rules will occur in that case. This is all about the common sense as a developer. When various developers are working on a single project, chances are that each one will use a different naming convention. Well, it can happen if you are working alone as well. Follow a single naming convention. When we type HTML, we use the XHTML syntax. In the CSS, generally we use lowercase, and more meaningful names will certainly help you to have multiple classes at a larger scale.